Good morning, everyone. I am Aakash. I'm Nair, Assistant Professor of Law, IIMT College of Law, and I'm going to present on the topic of data protection under the Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2013. In this PPT, we will discuss about the meaning of data. We will also discuss the significance of data protection. Why data requires protection? We will also discuss about which data is protected under the act, that is the scope and the applicability of the act. Also, who is to protect and whose data is protected, that is the stakeholders. So their rights, their obligations, and the duties, we will discuss about that. How can an individual enforce her rights when personal data breach occurs? So in this we will discuss about the grievance redressal mechanism, and also what are the penalties and the administrative body who will enforce these punishments. So discussing about what is data. So if we talk about the simple definition of data, and also that is provided under the Data Protection Act, it talks about data means any representation of information, facts, concepts, opinions, or instructions in a manner suitable for communication, interpretation, or processing by human beings or automated means. So when we discuss about data under the data protection law, it has a general meaning. That is, it is the representation of information, facts, concepts, opinion. But whether every data is protected under the act, whether if we have data in physical form, or if we have data in online form, whether every data that is available is protected under the act? No, it is the personal data that is protected under the act. So what is personal data? Personal data means any data about an individual who is identifiable by or in relation to such data. So any identifiable information that a person may have. So my age, my name, my date of birth, the place of my birth, everything which can be associated with me is my personal data, right? So what is digital personal data? So digital personal data is personal data which is available in digital form, right? So uh, so now let us talk about what is the significance of data, why data requires protection. So there are many threats. We all use Facebook, we all use Amazon, we all use many other platforms where we are required to put in our information, like whenever we register with any of these platforms, we have to give our data. So what happens is that there are big data companies. So they are big data companies, they are data processing companies who use our data to analyze our behavior. So there are many threats, such as there is the threat of unlawful unauthorized processing of our data. So who processes it? It is these data processing companies or the big data companies, right? Then there is the threat to data privacy. We all know that right to privacy has been recognized in the case Puttaswamy judgment, the privacy judgment. So and it has been called informational privacy or data privacy, which is threatened by such usage, unauthorized access of data. So an individual's autonomy and personal freedom on digital platform is threatened by these companies, these data processing companies, or these big data companies. So moving forward, the next threat is the threat of trans-border flow of data. We know that all the social media companies and now the artificial intelligence companies who are working on artificial intelligence are based out of India, based outside India, the mainly from Silicon Valley in US, right? So since they are based out of India, there is lot of trans-border flow of data. There is lot of trans-border flow of data. So to it is also a threat because we don't know if our data is moved somewhere else and what else processing there can be done, right? So there is a threat of trans-border flow of data as well. Now let us talk about the objective of the act. So according to the act, the act is to provide for the processing of digital personal data in a manner that recognizes both, firstly, the rights of the individuals to protect their data, and secondly, the need to process such personal data for lawful purposes, right? Now moving on, to the scope and applicability of the act. So which data is protected under the act? So I have mentioned it. The scope of the act is limited to digital personal data. Whenever we say digital personal data, it can be either that the data has been generated digitally, right, like our Aadhaar cards, it was generated digitally, or it can be documents which have been subsequently digitalized. So it can be, suppose, our property records which were in paper form, but now the government have uploaded these documents in their portal or in their websites. No, now that data which has digital signature will also be come under the digital personal data, right? Now, what are the kinds of data that we can find? So it is firstly the financial data, which includes bank accounts, bank account details, debit card, credit card, UPI password, etc. It can also be medical data, that is our biometric info or physical or mental health conditions, etc. And it can be personal data, or we can say private data, that is our sexual orientation, our private communication, etc. Okay, now this list is only suggestive. So there are many things which come under this act, but these are some of the kinds of data which is protected under the act, right? Now, the processing of data has been classified in two phases. Firstly, within the territory of India. So every data that is processed within the territory of India, which is collected in the digital form or in non-digital form, but digitalized subsequently, is is protected under the act. Also, the processing of data that is happening outside the territory of India, but it belongs, the personal data belongs to individuals within the territory of India. So it is also protected. Now we can see that the threat of trans-border flow of data has been recognized in the Act through the by including this process. See, it is similar to the IPC provision we have, that the law applies to national Indian nationals residing outside India also. So it is similar to that. Okay. Now the Act does not apply to, firstly, personal data processed by an individual for any personal or domestic purpose, right? Secondly, this personal data that is made or caused to be made publicly available. So any data which is publicly available, like if we can avail it through the RTI Act, right? Or anything that you have yourself disclosed on a public platform, it is not protected under this Act. Correct. Now moving forward, let us discuss who are the stakeholders in this act. So who is protected, right? Who is protected and whose data is protected? Now, firstly, the responsibility, the obligation, who is to protect, and secondly, whose data is protected. So we have to see the stakeholders. Now mainly there are four stakeholders. Firstly, it is the data principal. So data principal means the individual to whom the personal data relates, right? So any individual, any person whose data we can relate to, whose personal data we can relate to, that person is the data principal. In this case, if it is a child or a person with disability, then the lawful guardian is the data principal, right? Moving forward, the second participant is the data fiduciary. Now, data fiduciary means any person who alone or in conjunction with other persons determines the purpose and the means of processing personal data. So, these are the data fiduciaries. We can call them, let us say, the social media platforms. The social media platforms will be the data fiduciary, and you will be the data principal. You are using their website, you are providing your personal data. Now the data that has been collected by the social media platforms, they will decide how it will be processed, right? So they are the persons who determine the purpose and the means of processing personal data. So they are the data fiduciaries, right? Now we let us move forward. We have the third participant, that is the data processor. Data processor. Now, data processor is any person who processes the personal data on behalf of the data fiduciary, right? We know that who is data fiduciary. So data processor is the person who processes personal data on behalf of data fiduciary, right? So these are the big big data companies that I was mentioning earlier, the data processing companies who uses big data technology to process your information and make a pattern out of your behavior, or identify attributes of your personality, right? They identify the attributes of your personality. So uh, so these are the data processors. Now a person can be an individual. Within this definition, the in data processor means any person. So within this definition, a person can be an individual, uh, HUF, that is Hindu Undivided Family, a company, a firm, association of persons, body of individuals, or the state, or and every artificial juristic person. So the ambit of definition of the entities which are included as data processors or even data fiduciary is very wide, right? So moving forward, what is processing? So processing means automated operations, set of operations wholly or partly performed on the digital personal data, and it includes operations such as collection, recording, organization, structuring, storage, adaptation, and so on. Uh, Sharing, disclosure by transmission, dissemination, or otherwise making available, restriction, erasure, or destruction. Basically, we can say that these are automated processes, right? These are automated operations that are that are used on our personal data. So personal data, it can be either it is usually done by through algorithms. So the computer, we know the computer systems have algorithms, though these algorithms are used to process data. So mainly we have to focus on that it is automatic operations, automatic operations, right? Moving forward, so let us see how data is collected and what are the requirements. So first of all, suppose let us take an example that we are registering on let's say Facebook, right? We are registering on Facebook. So first of all, whenever we download the app or we go to their website, they will give us a notice informing that so and so data is being going to be collected. That is, say if you are logging through your Gmail account, then your name will be recorded, your email ID will be recorded. So these are your personal data, right? Now the second is that you being the data principal, you will accept, you will read the consent, you will read the notice, and you will accept to give your personal data. You will give your consent to use that platform, right? Now once the consent has been given, the data that has been collected by the data fiduciary will be given to a data processor. They will process it for legitimate purposes. For they are allowed to use it for only legitimate purposes, that is the purposes that are required for smooth functioning of the website, right? If you are using Facebook, so Facebook provides us such certain services that you can upload your photos, or you can type messages, you can text your friends. So these to provide smooth functioning of these features, uh, smooth functioning of these features, data processing will happen, right? Moving forward, what are the obligations of data fiduciary, right? uh, First, before moving on to the obligations, there is one important point that every liability that arises from the processing of data by the data processor uh, is uh, is belongs to the data fiduciary. That is, the data fiduciary will be responsible for every processing that the data processor does, right? Because the data processor is acting or functioning on behalf of the data fiduciary, right? Now moving forward, uh, these are the obligations of data fiduciary. So data fiduciary may process the personal data for which the data principal has given its consent, and it is used only for legitimate purposes, right? Firstly, the consent has to be given. Secondly, it has to be used for certain legitimate uses, right? There is also the obligation to give notice. We have seen it in the example as well in the previous slide. They have a responsibility to give notice to data principal, informing them about the personal data that is going to be processed. Secondly, they will also inform the data principal about her right to withdraw her consent. So if you don't no longer want, then you don't want that your personal data should be collected, you can withdraw your consent as well. You have given your consent, now you want that your data should not be shared, you can withdraw the consent as well, right? This has to be informed by the data fiduciary. Now, moving forward, the notice will also include the process to make complaint to the board. Right now, here the board is the fourth participant that we did not discuss about. The board is the Digital Data Protection Board of India. Right, it is the that it is the independent authority which which regulates and which supervises the functioning of data principals and the data fiduciaries and all other stakeholders within the regime of data protection. Right, Data Protection Act. Now, moving forward, the data fiduciary also has the responsibility to comply with the acts and the rules that have been provided. The act is the Data Protection Act, and also the rules. It also has to comply with the IT Act also, that is the Information Technology Act. Right. Moving forward, the data fiduciary shall protect the personal data in its possession. So it is, I think, clear so far. If they don't do, if they don't do, it will amount to personal data breach. So it is their responsibility that they provide certain reasonable security safeguards to prevent personal data breaches. Now, continuing with the obligations of data fiduciary, they also have to provide effective mechanism to redress the grievances of data principals. So if data principal has any grievance regarding the processing of data, they should know whether to apply. So it is the duty of the data fiduciary to make the data principal aware about the redressal grievance redressal mechanism that is available. Secondly, uh, now moving forward, in the event of personal data breach, data fiduciary shall give the board notice, intimation about such breach. Right. Now moving forward, data principle, rights and duties of data principle. So first of all, the data principal has right to access information. It is very important. Right to access information. They can access the personal data that is being processed. Secondly, the right to correction and erasure of personal data. So if there is any correction that is required, or they want that no longer the personal data should be used, then they have the right to correction and erasure of data. Thirdly, we have the right to have readily available means of grievance redressal. We have discussed this point earlier as well. They also have principal also has the right to nominate any person in the event of death or incapacity of data principal. They can nominate a person. Right. Data principal also have certain duties. Right. So moving forward, the enforcement mechanism. So if there is a personal data breach, then the data principal uh, shall approach the data fiduciary and will inform them about any personal data breach. So they will have the grievance redressal mechanism. Secondly, a complaint can be raised to the data protection board, but this has to be after exhaustion of the remedy that is available with the data fiduciary. Right. Moving forward, we have the role of Data Protection Board of India. So it is an independent body. Right, it can function in digital office as well. So there may not be any physical office, but they can function as a digital office. The board is a body corporate, that is, they have perpetual succession, they have a common seal, they have the power to acquire and hold, dispose of property. They also have the power to contract, sue, and be sued. Right. The board shall consist of chairperson and such other persons who are appointed by the central government. Then we have they have the power to inquire into the personal data breaches and also impose penalty. The penalty may raise up to even 200 crores. So if the data fiduciary fails to inform the board about any personal data breach, then they may be held liable up to 200 crores. Right. uh, they also have same powers as the civil code. So thank you so much for viewing this channel. I conclude.